I went into a clothes store and a woman decided that I didn't belong there. She tried to humiliate me, called the manager and made a fuss. But in the end, the manager found out who really shouldn't be there. There are days when you just want to go out shopping and live your life in peace. But there's always someone who thinks they can decide who deserves to be in a place and who doesn't. It was a quiet afternoon, and I decided to stop by a clothing store in the mall. Nothing much. I just wanted to have a look at some new clothes, maybe buy something if I liked it. The crime of the century, right? I went in, said hello to the sales assistant, and started looking through the racks. I was standing there, distracted, when I felt angry looks coming from the left-hand side. The first thing I thought was, damn, am I accidentally in the women's section? But no, I was in the right place. The problem was her, a middle-aged woman full of jewelry, designer handbags, and that face of someone who thinks she's always right. The kind of person who measures others by the value of their clothes and not by their character. And, apparently, I didn't pass her test. She looked at me with an expression of deep disapproval, as if she was waiting for some security guard to show up and drag me out. At first, I ignored it. But then came the loud sigh, the rolling of the eyes, the dramatic shake of the head. It was already getting on my nerves, but I decided to have some fun. I picked up the most expensive piece in the store and examined it calmly, right in front of her. What happened next? She couldn't stand it.
Are you sure you're in the right place?
Ah, here it comes. The classic, "You don't belong here." I looked at her and smiled. Yes, I am. But it seems you're not sure whether you should meddle in other people's lives. She made a face like she'd been slapped, but she didn't back down. She wanted to prove a point. She turned and went straight to the saleswoman. She whispered something, made exaggerated gestures, and, a minute later, the saleswoman came up to me, embarrassed. "Sir, can I help you with something?" "Oh, of course." The old, "if I don't like the presence of this person, I'll call someone to politely remove them" trick. But little did this woman know that the humiliation was about to change sides. If there's one thing that annoys me deeply, it's when people try to judge you without knowing anything about you. The saleswoman came up to me, visibly uncomfortable. She knew it didn't make sense, but for some reason she felt she had to intervene. The woman, on the other hand, stood with her arms crossed, smiling as if she had just won a battle. She really thought she was going to throw me out with the power of prejudice. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just looking at the clothes, like everyone else in the store. But for her, the way I looked, the way I dressed or whatever, was reason enough to treat me like an intruder. I wanted to see how far this nonsense would go. The saleswoman, trying to be professional, asked me if I was looking for something specific. Oh, what a great idea. I took a deep breath and spoke in the calmest, most polite voice in the world. Actually, yes, I want to see the most expensive pieces you have. The saleswoman was surprised. The woman almost choked. Her smile vanished instantly. The confidence of someone who was sure she was in charge was replaced by a look of pure annoyance. She hadn't expected this turn of events. In her mind, I shouldn't have had the money to buy anything there. The saleswoman, for her part, realized that she had gotten herself into a tricky situation. She glanced at the woman as if expecting a reaction, but, as the creature had frozen, she simply guided me to the most expensive section of the store. Now what? Now it was my turn to have fun. I picked up an absurdly expensive jacket, held it against my body, and looked in the mirror. Then I picked up a pair of leather pants, ran my hand over the fabric and shook my head, evaluating. Meanwhile, the woman was seething with hatred in the corner of the store. She couldn't believe what was happening. In her mind, I should have been thrown out by now. But there I was, being attended to, choosing expensive pieces, and probably ruining her day. Now I just had to decide how to deliver the final blow. The woman didn't know what else to do. She had lost control of the situation, and it was killing her. You could see the mixture of anger and frustration on her face as I continued to analyze the most expensive clothes in the store. Perhaps, in her mind, I was just a busybody trying to play the rich guy to defy her. But the problem is that when people assume they know everything about you without knowing anything, they put themselves in dangerous positions. And she was about to learn that the hard way. I picked up a few more pieces, examined the details, and finally looked at the saleswoman. She was nervous, probably hoping I wouldn't make a fuss, but I didn't need to. I picked up the most expensive jacket I had chosen and spoke calmly. "I'll take that one." The saleswoman breathed a sigh of relief, but on the other side of the store, the woman simply lost color. She looked like a statue, watching the scene as if she couldn't believe what was happening. It was as if, at that moment, her brain short-circuited. I could see the gears of her mind turning desperately.
But he shouldn't be here. He can't afford it. He can't afford it.
Except I could, and that destroyed her inside. When the saleswoman took the jacket to pack and escorted me to the checkout, I heard the exact moment when the woman lost what little dignity she had left. She simply let out a sound of indignation, turned on her heels, and marched out of the store. And what about me? Oh, I just smiled, because, in the end, she couldn't bear her own humiliation. But the best was yet to come. If the woman thought that fleeing the scene would erase the embarrassment, she was sorely mistaken. I had already chosen my jacket, I was already at the checkout, and I was having a great time. But, to my surprise, she came back. Yes, she came back. She was probably mulling over her anger, thinking how unfair it was, how the universe shouldn't have allowed me to take that jacket so easily. Because, in her mind, this story should have had a different ending. The store was silent, so I could hear the sound of her heels hitting the floor as she returned to pure determination. Now her plan was different, to make it look like the problem was never with me.
Is there a discount on that jacket?
She asked, pointing to the one I was buying. The saleswoman froze. Me? I bit my tongue to keep from laughing. The woman looked straight at me and tried to ignore the reality that was right in her face. She wanted to show that she was still in control, that the store was her environment, that her purchase was more important than mine. The problem was that she took too long to act, because while she stood there, judging me, wasting time trying to throw me out, making faces and mouths, I had already bought the jacket. The saleswoman, still not sure whether to laugh or cry, replied as professionally as possible. "Ah, miss, that jacket has just been sold." And then silence. The woman blinked a few times, as if waiting for the information to process better in her head. She lost. Again. Now, as well as not being able to kick me out of the store, she still had to deal with the fact that the item she wanted was officially out of her reach. What about me? I picked up my bag, smiled slightly, and left the store as if nothing had happened. But I knew that, inside, she was on fire, and it wasn't going to stay that way for her. I was satisfied. The jacket was in the bag, the payment made, and the woman's humiliation complete. Of course, people like that never accept defeat with dignity. I left the store feeling that air of silent victory, that moment when you know you've won without having to raise your voice or make a fuss. But the final outburst was yet to come. As I walked through the mall, I could still see the store in the reflection of the surrounding windows, and that's when I realized she was still inside, gesticulating, talking loudly, complaining to the sales assistant as if she were reporting a terrible crime. But what crime was it? Someone daring to exist in a space that she thought belonged to her alone? The saleswoman's expression said it all. Sheer exhaustion. She just listened as the woman tried to justify the unjustifiable, and I could imagine exactly what she was saying.
You shouldn't have sold him that jacket.
Because, deep down, it wasn't about the garment. It was about her ego being crushed. For the woman, that store was sacred territory, where only those she considered suitable could be, and I had shattered that illusion in just a few minutes. But the best was yet to come. The public doesn't forgive. As she continued her rant, I realized something even more amusing. The other customers were watching. You could see it in the looks on their faces. Some people were trying not to laugh. Others were whispering among themselves. And some just looked on in sheer confusion, trying to understand how someone could get so worked up over something so ridiculous. And then, the icing on the cake. A mall security guard showed up. Yes, someone called security to deal with her. Because, you see, it wasn't me who was causing trouble there. I'd just gone in, looked at some clothes, and bought what I wanted. It was her who was turning the store into a dramatic theater. The security guard approached and spoke to the sales assistant, who probably explained the situation in a professional tone, but internally was mentally resigning for the 4th time that day. The woman, on the other hand, didn't take the intervention at all well. Now she was trying to justify herself to the security guard, gesticulating even more, her eyes full of indignation, as if she expected him to do something about it. But what could he do? Force the store to sell her the jacket? I stood nearby, pretending to be distracted by my cell phone, but actually enjoying every second of the spectacle. Because now, the attention was no longer on me. She had become the problem. She had played the victim from the start, but now she was seen as the only inconvenient person there. And, in the end, there was no escape. After a few more minutes of discussion, the saleswoman shook her head, and the security guard made a clear gesture. She needed to leave. That's right. The woman who tried to throw me out ended up being removed from the store. The walk of shame. She left stomping, huffing, her face red, completely humiliated. The customers watching the scene avoided looking at her directly, but you could see the hidden smiles. And me? I made a point of approaching the security guard as she passed me and unleashed the final blow. Be careful not to miss the exit. You seem to get confused so easily about where you can and can't be. She almost exploded, but with the security guard by her side, there was no more room for a fuss. The woman gave one last hateful look, huffed, and disappeared down the mall corridor. And just like that, the universe was restored to equilibrium. I looked at the jacket in the bag and was sure it was the best purchase I'd ever made. Moral of the story? Some people think they can decide who belongs where. There are people who measure others by the way they look, the way they dress, what they think they know about them. But the problem with these types of people is that, sooner or later, they end up tasting their own poison. And that woman? Well, she came into the store thinking she could get me out. But, in the end, she was the one who left. Have you ever had to deal with someone like that? That person who thinks they own the place and judges others without even knowing them? Tell me in the comments. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it for more unbelievable stories like this one. Want to see more absurd situations? Click on the card and come watch. See you in the next one.